On another channel, someone posted a commentary concerning homelessness and what's going on. And these are common sentiments. I'm going to read them pretty much in the order it showed up. A homeless guy next door was living in a tent and was taken away at 11 a.m., staying up most of the night, not getting up until around noon. I find that a little odd. Just don't think I could sleep that late. I spoke to the guy who owns the property, who was allowing the guy to stay there. He said he'd been burglarizing houses in the area. Or someone said. I'm a little disgusted with him as well. It's just not the way to help someone so half-hearted. The guy was stealing because he needed money for whatever. I just don't think helping someone is simply giving them somewhere to set up a tent. He had told my friend he was looking for a job, but how is he going to hold down a job with nowhere to clean up and only a bike for transportation? If I was going to help someone, I'd go all in or none at all. Now, this is not something I have a strong opinion on, even though I've lived it. So I'm going to give my own personal experience, quote-unquote, your truth. I say that in a mocking way, but really, everyone's independent perspective is, as far as they know, the real world. Hence this commentary. So let's go over this person next door. When you go to bed, if you live indoors, and I'm saying if because some of you are realizing rent isn't stable. You can be thrown out of your home without reason. There aren't any protections in most of the United States. And a lot of you believe, if you are well-to-do, that your entire existence depends on your housing prices staying high, which excludes people from ever being able to afford what you were able to afford. Which is a pet peeve I have with humanity, because I was homeless and also because I want to buy a hunk of ground to live on. And the first thing in most Americans' minds is, A, we'll just go find a cheap piece of property, or B, you have to fight hard to get property, which is bullshit. A hunk of ground and a building to live in is a basic necessity like air, water, food, medical care, and the ability to access knowledge like you're doing watching this video. These are basic human rights that, depending on your opinion, political motivation, or ulterior motives like keeping your housing prices up, you're willing to sacrifice in everybody else except you. And we should all own that. Don't make me emperor of the planet. You won't like what I do to it, said everybody who was sane and reasonable. So let's talk about the next door neighbor here. He had a hunk of ground where someone needed a place to camp and he let him camp there. May have even charged him money. We don't know. The point is that good enough? I had one of 3 locations in Portland, barely, 3 miles away from the first place I'd ride a bicycle to camp where someone wouldn't beat me to death for $5. Someone wouldn't demand tribute or payment, wouldn't come along and just idly threaten me because they were bored. After the 15th or 20th fist fight you've been in, it gets really tiring. Ask any boxer. It's exhausting dealing with it, and it means that you can't sleep. If you can't sleep because you don't feel safe when you sleep, you don't sleep properly. Without sleep, another physiological, biologically imperative behavior like needing to relieve yourself that people very often fucking ignore. If you can't take a piss once in a while, if you can't defecate once a day, bare minimum, if you can't clean yourself, if you can't sleep because you don't feel safe where you sleep, this can be a demoralizing, debilitating, and dehumanizing thing. It can also just kill you. It can make you insane. All of them can. And not paying attention to that is something you can hear actively done in a couple of debates about 5 years ago. One Republican said, well, people can go without sleep and they don't need to clean themselves, just on and on and on. Just denialism after denialism. Same thing with a liberal that was complaining that when they were in power in whatever city it was, I don't know which city it was, they said, well, it doesn't matter we didn't provide that for the poor people. They can live through it. Sure, technically, but that's not how the real world works. Not being able to get a decent night's sleep will kill you. So the guy had a hunk of dirt where, at least ostensibly until the police showed up, he couldn't be made to not sleep. Deprivation of sleep is a way to murder somebody or to torture them. But in this case, the person's also a burglar and wanted to look for work. And first step is being able to have a physical location you can sleep at. I took down my tent and put it back up every day and went to sleep on the same hunk of ground, to the point that I was able to retool the earth underneath me to be like a bed. I literally made it comfortable to lay on with or without a tent. And I was able to survive this way for years. But is that doing me any good? Yes. It meant that I could heal up from a back injury. It meant that I had the option of making money. And I did make a living whenever I could. And I saw people living out of a car having the same amount of success, and people living in an apartment having the same amount of success, because there's an undercurrent of an entire population that could be up to 20 or 30% of the population area that are the unseen, desperately poor. We put on the trappings of normalcy. I wore absolutely normal street clothing. I didn't dress, quote unquote, homeless. Or if I did, it was only the overcoat. I'd pull it off and I looked like everybody else. It would take 20 minutes for someone to figure out at the coffee shop while I was fixing their computer that I was living in a tent, because I threw my coat over it. They would just see this lump and be a coat and figure, oh, I threw it over a chair. No, that's my backpack that's almost the same size as me. And I had a bicycle that I tied up outside. I'm in Portland. Bicycles are all over the place. No one's going to think twice. The backpack was the only thing I had to hide, and at one time I was able to hide it efficiently. At one time I could hide it at the bus station, because they had lockers and you could rent them out per day and they wouldn't take anything from you. They just wanted your money in exchange for the space used. Well, it's only supposed to be for bus people. No, it's a locker. If you gave every homeless person not a place to live, but a ticket, call it a ticket, that says they're allowed to camp in designated areas because they paid a fee once a year or once a week. And if you gave them a place to store their crap so they were just as normal looking as you, I guarantee you they'd have not just a leg up, but a whole freaking pole vaulting session getting up out of the muck, which makes them a threat to your job, because instead of worrying about the Mexicans coming for your jibs, you'd be dealing with your fellow Americans that are poor, being able to walk in very motivated to get a job and maintain it. What's your address? Oh, I'm using a P.O. box because I believe in my privacy, J.J. Luna style. So again, do we help them all or nothing? All or nothing kills people, I'm afraid to say. If I was going to help someone, I would literally just, here's a place to stay. Don't break these rules. Here are the rules. Do nothing that causes the police to show up ever. And if they do show up and it's easily explained as them being jerks or just a mistake, that doesn't count. You're okay. I was given that offer at one point, and I stayed indoors for several years in a place I called the hovel, because I completely reconditioned and rebuilt the framework and part of the foundation for a small building and lived in it. I was perfectly fine. And then the owner of the property foreclosed and bulldozed the whole thing so he could put up a single family, smaller home than either the big building or the little building, and rent it out or sell it for 15 times what he bought it for, because it's money. It has nothing to do with fixing the world or making it worse. It's not evildoers. It's just greed. Obviously, the guy was stealing because he needed money for whatever. I understand. Have I ever stolen? Let's get that out of the way. I'm a trained computer hacker, and I'm trained in forgery. But actually, no, I haven't broken any laws. I always get someone to pay me money to do it, like the bank. It's still a violation of federal law, but the bank does it. It's okay, apparently, right? But hey, your systems are more secure simply because I made sure they stayed that way instead of what they wanted. Don't ask. Yes, it was you, bank. But the point is, what does this story tell us? The next door neighbor allowed someone to stay on property. That person did something bad. They had just enough to get along, but not enough to get out of the muck. Or how many years was it? And does this happen everywhere else? And should it? Can this work? That's why I'm doing the video. Again, I'm going to explain this to you. This was the infrastructure of homelessness in Portland, Oregon when it worked. This was when I was living indoors, gainfully employed, and I helped create what we called the Portland Street Kids Guide, or Portland Guide, or the Homeless Resource Guide. Me and about a dozen other hackers in the area found every single resource in the area that we could think of to exploit if we were, in my perspective, traveling salesmen. That's the thing my dad taught me. He was a hobo on rails at one time. Or a business worker. Or, well, basically the traveling salesman is the best reference point. It's classic. You can get into it. It's almost romantic. But the other one is being, a techno gypsy, like the rest of us. Hackers that would go from county to county or city to city or state to state. Or country to country. We could live by our wits, and it was exciting. I made a living that way doing audio work for various bands in Portland, pretty much every band. I don't name drop them because I don't care. It's not relevant. All I did was fix amps and solder things while the vehicle was moving. For fuck's sake, can't you stop the van for 2 minutes for me to do a solder joint? Yes, I was that guy in the back being slapped back and forth by the whole mechanism. I would trap myself between two Marshall amps in order to be braced in place because they packed them properly for some reason, even though Marshall amps are pretty much tanks. Speaker stacks, not the amps. It's a separate component, preamp. But anyway, the point I'm making here is my way of getting out of the muck was accident. Someone said, yeah, just don't break any rules. Okay. Eventually I ended up helping enforce them. I paid my rent. I earned a living when I could. When I couldn't, I borrowed from a relative and paid back if I could. But the most important thing I did was fixing the water pipe when it broke one year so they didn't have to spend thousands of dollars. Making it to where the building had insulation where it didn't before. Repairing an entire floor so someone didn't fall through and break their damn neck. Putting in better wiring so the building didn't burn down because it almost burned down one day. And then flooded. And I fixed that too. I'm very much capable of starting an entire civilization by just teaching people how to drive a nail correctly, just like the rest of you. We all have this ability. Whether we know it or not. We just have to accumulate knowledge because all of us have one piece of the puzzle. We're all blind mice trying to build the elephant. But the point here is, when given the opportunity, people rise to the occasion, and that makes rich people pissed. Oh no, the rich guy down the street has a tent in a backyard, legally. Let's make it illegal. And it is. The Homeowners Association or zoning laws will make it illegal. It's part of the system. The system is dependent on scaring you to go to work. If you don't see homeless people on the side of the road practically dying from the plague, you won't keep going to work. If you see those homeless people, are you willing to ask for a raise? It's a motivation to do so and also a motivation not to. It's part of a system. And when you're not part of it, you're its enemy. So I'm sort of just going on a rant here. But this is food for thought here. Thank you very much for posting this, Starless Mystery. We, as a species, our fellow man, 100, 200 feet away, barely getting above a level, still not high enough to stop needing to steal some fruit or maybe steal some garbage in the backyard or garbage can, recycling, or maybe the person was a criminal. I don't know. How would you handle it if you couldn't sleep every night so that you could go off and do a job interview? You couldn't get a bath unless you went into some restroom at some coffee shop or a gas station, cleaned up as best you could. How would you cope? Would you? Have you? I have. It's easy now. You could drop me in the middle of the Ukraine and I could probably blend in except for my ability to speak. I can guarantee I'd learn Russian or something as fast as possible because I wouldn't have a choice. That's when you find out what you can do. And that's what you find out what people don't want you to be able to do. And it's the most dangerous time to do that to you. So I don't know what to think of this story other than I empathize, but I know nothing of this person. I'm very familiar with it, and yet this is completely foreign. Now I feel much more foreign to it. It feels good now. I have almost no reference point until I walk outside with my shirt just a little untucked, and suddenly it all comes flooding back, and all I'm thinking is, I know that tree can shield me from the rain. I'll stand under it. because it's my first instinct now. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck.